All right, so I'm here in Unity, and I'm going to show you how Playmaker works. So I have a basic scene set up, and I have a few things in the scene. I'll just point them out really quickly. So hopefully this will make sense. I, of course, have a first-person controller in my scene, so I can move through it. My camera, I have a directional light just to make things look good. I have a terrain. But then I have this thing, it's a treasure box, and yes, I know it's misspelled. That's because the asset is misspelled, and if you try to correct the spelling, it breaks. So, um, and this treasure box has an animation connected to it. Actually, two of them, box open and box close. And so what we're going to do is use Playmaker to set it up so that when this first-person controller approaches the box in a certain area close to it, then it's going to trigger the box to open and close. But before we can do that, we have to install Playmaker. So you should have a link to download our licensed version of Playmaker. And if you then, let's see here. All right, I'm going to have to find that. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, so I know that I have it in here. Let's see. Playmaker. Playmaker. Okay. So when you unzip Playmaker, you then, which here's a zip, you'll then have a folder. All right, and this is very important. Notice that there are 4 files in here. Do not just double click them at random. Okay. In fact, you're only going to choose one of them, and you'll see here that it says Playmaker, or I'm sorry, Unity 4.6. Unity 5.0, 5.3, 5.4. You need to go to your version of Unity and go to Unity, about Unity, see which version you have. So here I see I have version 5.3. Okay, so then I come over here, and with Unity open, with my scene open, I then find that version, and that's the version I double click, and only that one. Don't install the other ones or you will mess up your project. Okay. And when I do this, then it asks me to import the asset, which is all good, and that's where we're at. So now I see that I have a Playmaker folder in here, but notice also I have up here a Playmaker menu. So if you don't see the Playmaker menu, you probably installed the wrong version. And then you'll see another thing that says install Playmaker. You may think, I installed it already, I put the plugin in. No, you didn't, it has to do some other stuff. So I click this install, and then it wants to do a pre-check to make sure there are no conflicts in your project. All right, you may just want to click that to run it again. It says it's happy. If it's not happy, you probably want to make some changes to your project, remove certain things. There could be something that is off. And then I click install again, and it asks, did you make a backup? If you have a project that has a whole lot going on, what you want to do is in the folder structure on your computer, before you even install Playmaker, just copy and paste that entire folder so you have another version of it, and then zip it so you know you have a backup. If you don't do that, you could actually mess up your project. So I'll say I did make a backup here, go ahead. Then I see this again, right? So it's redundant, but just go through with it and click import. Okay, and you'll know that you've finished when, if you close this little window here, under Playmaker, if you see this, Playmaker Editor. Because to launch Playmaker, now that I've done this, I actually may want to save my scene, save my project, which I'm not going to do here just because this is my default. But if I go to Playmaker and I say Playmaker Editor, then I get actually this. And it may actually pop up sort of outside of your Unity as another window. If you can see here, if you have a really large monitor, you might see it like this. You can actually take this, you can put your mouse over the tab, click and move it down, really anywhere you want. But I like to just put it right here because then it's there. And actually I want to show these menus, so let me do that. All right, good. So now I've got I have Playmaker installed. The first thing that you want to do then, if you, let's say that we want to trigger this box to open and close. The first thing we need to do is, anything has an animation on it, we need to make sure that the animation is configured as what's known as a legacy animation. And the way you do that is you click on the asset in the hierarchy here, and then you come over here into the inspector, and right here it says model, and I choose select. Okay, and then by default it'll be on this model. You go then to this sub-tab rig. You want to make sure the animation type is set to legacy. If it's not, change it to say legacy and then click apply. So it's already legacy here, so I'm good. And I can click anywhere on the scene to then start over again. Okay. And the second thing you have to do is you have to put what's called a collider around this asset. And what a collider is if you imagine you can create an invisible force shield around any object. And imagine this for just an object that's on your desk right now. Draw a box around it. And then, even though you don't see it, know that that's this invisible box. And that's known as a collider. Normally, if you move up to that collider, then in Unity, you can't move past that invisible, the boundaries of that invisible box. And so you'll be stuck, which is actually just a good thing to know how to do in general. Then you can keep people from, falling off the world or going to places you don't want them to go. But in this case, we're going to set it up as a trigger. All right. So the way you add a collider is I select my asset, and then I go over here to the inspector, click Add Component, and then I type in collider in search, and we're going to use a box collider. And notice what happens then. Now I have this highlighted area around that box, okay? But it's really small. So for this to work the way I want it to work, I want the the boundaries of that box to go about out here. So you can now come to this where it says box collider. If you see here, it has size, and it's 0.2, basically between 0.1 and 0.2. I'm going to change that to X, Y, and Z 1, and look what happens. Okay, now I have that invisible force shield. That's what I want to get to. Okay, so I'm there, and I then want to do one other thing, which is, well, I'll just show you. If I go into play mode, and I'm going to walk up to my box and forget the fact that it opened, which is the third thing we have to do. I try to get to it, and it's like, oh, I can't move past it. It's like there's a force field keeping me out, right? That's how colliders are supposed to work by default. But if you go over here and click the Is Trigger checkbox, okay, now when I walk up to it, I can walk past that. So what does that mean? It means that when I walk past that boundary, it triggers something in Unity that allows a script to say, aha, I'm looking to see when you cross that boundary. Now I'm going to do something. It's known as an action. All right, so it's actions and triggers. One other thing that we want to then set up to in configuration here is, if you see here in the inspector under animation, there is a box that says play automatically. You want to uncheck that. All right, and now you see when I go into play mode, my box doesn't open automatically because play automatically is not selected. So that explains why that. All right, so the three things: turn off play automatically, add a box collider, and then say that it's a trigger, right? Those three things. And then you also want to, I guess, 3.5/4 things are, you want to change the size of it so that whatever boundary you want something to then be triggered, that's going to be the size of the box. Okay, so now our scene is set up. And again, you may want to go here and say File, Save Scene, File, Save Project. All right. But what I'm going to do now is I click on the treasure box, okay, and then I go to the Playmaker tab, which is the plugin that I installed. And notice right here it says right-click to add FSM. What does FSM mean? That stands for Fixed State Manager, and it's basically programming talk for what this is, which is a fixed state manager. It's managing states, okay? And what are states? States are the different states of being that an object is in, and you assume that it changes as you go through state to state. So the nice thing about Playmaker is you are scripting behind the scenes, but you don't have to write a single line of code. You can just go here and do what it says, right-click to add FSM. So if I right-click and say add FSM, then I get this box, and it says start, state 1. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and add 2 more states here. because I happen to know, because I plan this out in advance, although this is something you should really plan yourself in advance, maybe write it out, is state one is going to be basically this box waiting for something to happen, okay? So wait for a trigger, right? And the trigger, I'm waiting for someone to enter my boundaries. Wait, I'm a box collider that is waiting for someone to enter my boundaries. That's all that does. All right. The next state is going to be opening. All right. The third state is going to be closing. Notice nothing's connected right now because I'm just setting up my logic. I know, first of all, what are the things I want to happen, and this is important too. Notice the first state is super boring. It does one and only one thing. It waits for something to happen to trigger it. That's it. So you should repeat after me now. The first state never does anything. It's always boring. It waits for something to happen. What does the first state do? Is it something exciting? No, it's boring, okay? So boring, waiting for trigger. And then the states after that are when things happen. So I have my my states set up. Now I need to do what's basically add the transition events for those. So if I right click, I can say add transition, and then there's something called system events. And notice all the things that come up here. I have all kinds of stuff like something becomes visible, collision enter, joint break, level loaded. There's a lot of different stuff you can do. Mouse down and mouse up and mouse enter, those are all related to clicking on things. But here we're going to say trigger enter, all right? And so if I say trigger enter, it says, let's see here. Sometimes you'll see these little errors. Let's see what the error says. What is the error? Error, transition missing target state. Okay, that's because I haven't connected anything. Okay, so it's waiting for something to happen. So if I then left click on this gray area, now I get this arrow and I can connect it then to the next state, which is it's going to open. Okay, so look at the logic. I start out, it's waiting for something to enter its trigger area, and then when that happens, then it can go to the next state. What happens in the next state? It's going to open. All right, so imagine that we do something that says, hey, box opens. But after that, something else has to happen to let me close the box. And in this case, that's going to be leaving the trigger area. So here I'm going to add a transition, and the system event will be trigger exit. And when I exit trigger, then I'm allowed to close. All right, and the last state is closing. And here I'm going to add a transition, and this is going to be finished because I want to then go back to the beginning. All right, so now I have a logic flow set up, and I'm almost done here. But before I make stuff happen, I want you to see what happens when I go into play mode, and then I want you to watch right here in Playmaker for what goes on, because this is the testing your logic stage. Okay, so I'm here, I'm moving towards the box. Okay, look at that green area, that green outline around waiting for a trigger. Look, it just changed to opening. Okay, and when I leave, it changes to closing really quick, and then it goes back to waiting for trigger enter. So you can kind of go back and forth and see that happening in real time. See that? So this is good. Now I see my logic is good, and now I can then add the magic. All right. It's very important to have your logic set up correctly before you make things happen, i.e. the magic. All right, so I'm in trigger enter, then I go to trigger exit, and this is where you get to the magic, which is the actions. So when I click on the opening state, notice that over here I have this button that says action browser. When I click on it, I see another little window pop up, which is annoyingly, there's a lot of pop-ups in this. You're just going to have to get used to it. Oh, let me try that again. Make it a little bigger so you can see it. There are a whole bunch of different actions in here, and you can read through the Playmaker documentation to see what you can do, but I happen to know, in this case, that I want to trigger an animation. So if I type in animation, I see two things at the top here, play animation, stop animation. So I know that I want play animation to begin with. Okay, I'm going to add that there. Then when I go over here to closing, I want to also play another animation. All right, so now look, I have opening, and then in my state area, I've added this action. When I clicked add action and play animation, it added this element here, and it says play animation, game object use owner. Okay, the owner is the thing that the fixed state manager is tied to, and you can tell what that is by looking up here in the hierarchy, and you'll see this Playmaker icon, some kind of kanji. All right, so if I go over this way, then, and I say game object use owner, I choose animation name, I want to trigger box open. Then over here, when I'm on the closing, the play animation is going to be box close. Okay, and now let's see what happens. When I walk up to it, aha, my box opens. When I leave, my box closes. So I have a nice little Pac-Man thing going on with the treasure box, which is pretty cool. All right, it's very simple, but that's okay. All right, and I'll give you a little hint for how magic this can become, or interactive, is I can put any number of different actions on this one event, okay, on this one state. So when I move to this state and the box opens, let's see if we can make something else happen. And what I'm going to do here, I'll spell it out for you, is here I have my treasure box, and over here I have two cubes. One is position 1, position 1, and then position 2, and I named them that for a reason. All right, then I have this sphere, and I'm going to set it up so that this sphere moves to position 1 when the box opens, and then after that it's going to move to position 2 when the box closes. When I then go back, it'll go between these two areas, all right, just as an example. So I'm going to go back to my Playmaker, and I'm going to then say, okay, when I go to trigger, I'm opening as trigger, the opening state, I had play animation here. I'm going to add another action. So I click Action Browser. And when you want to make something move, the function for that is called itween, I-T-W-E-E-N. And you can do, there's itween move to, there's look from, there's a bunch of different things you can do, but I'm going to choose move to. All right. And because I know I want it to move from one place to another, I'm going to add another action on the other one that's also itween move to. Okay. So now let's look on trigger, the opening, trigger exit. It says itween move to, use owner. All right. Remember, who's the owner? Is the owner the sphere that I want to move? No, it's not. It's the box. If I don't change this, what's going to happen is my box is going to move rather than my sphere. So I want to change this to say specify game object. And when I do that, then I can choose an object. And so you know the object's name is sphere. I can click on this little circle here, and I can then, if you click on the scene tab, choose my sphere. Okay, now my sphere is going to move. All right. And just because I'm going to be anal retentive here, I'm going to specify the same object on the closing one. And I'm going to say that's also sphere. All right. Oh, let's see. Oh, I did that on the wrong thing. Whoops. So we have that box closed. Oh, it's right down here. Specify game object, choose sphere. And there we go. Okay. So what would the next variable be? Well, I need to tell it what to move to. And this is why I have these boxes here, position 1 and position 2. because I'm going to say move to transform position is going to be position 1. All right. And over here on this one, I'm going to say the transform position is position 2. All right. Now this is what I call the plug and pray moment. Watch that sphere. When this box opens, my sphere should move. All right. Kind of hard to, oh, there we go. So now you can sort of see it, right? It's moving between the two places. Then it goes back. All right, so we have this little dance set up. So what's cool about this, multiple things can happen on different objects, both the owner and then the, in this case, another position. There are a lot of other actions you can trigger. There's playing sound and many others. So if you think about this, just knowing how to have one thing move to another when something happens, and then also triggering animation, that's the majority of what you're going to need to create interactive stories within Unity and Playmaker. So I know this is a lot. You may want to watch this a few times over, but it's really simple. You're going to stumble a lot, and then you're going to get frustrated. You're going to click on things and not realize what you did, and you'll have to start over. But by doing that, you will then learn these skills so you can do it just as easily as I just did. So good luck, and let me know if you need any help.